We are back for a Quirkies wrap-up. I'm Evan Matthews, co-founder and CEO at Macroverse, and today we are going to put the finishing touches on this celebratory one-of-one Quirky derivative character that I have made from a bunch of submissions that were all awesome that came in on Twitter. We're almost done with this, so I am going to slide over to Clip Studio. And man, I've missed working on this guy for a couple days because we've been crazy busy with a bunch of stuff. But there's not a lot left that I want to do. You can see the original character down here in the bottom right. There's a whole series of these live streams that capture the whole process of making this guy. But right now, we'll be wrapping it up. And then later today, I will be dropping it into the wallet of the original holder of this Quirky. So hopefully we'll get to do a couple more of these over the course of our partnership here, and that will be a lot of fun for me, a way to celebrate the community and the excitement for the incredible collection that this is based on. So a couple things I want to do. One is I'm actually quite happy with this. Like, I thought I would come back to it and see a few other things, but mostly I feel like, it's pretty much done. So there's a couple things I want to do. One is I do want to get that logo, kind of the little symbol, the OG Quirk symbol onto the sweatshirt here. And then I want to play around with the background just a little bit. I think it's working really quite well at the moment, but I may come back to it just the way that it is, but I'm going to play around with it a little bit. And then the last thing I noticed is that the color difference between the pink of the Quirkies, let's call it, skin tone, versus the purple of the, particles or bubbles or boba, as I kind of see them, they are not the same, and they're feeling very much the same in my version. So we're just going to tweak the color of the bubbles, because I think even though I've ended up pushing a little more towards purples in my rendition here, where we've got kind of the light source hitting is where we really see the original pink tone of the Quirky itself. But the bubbles nonetheless are a different shade. And so I want to make sure we capture that. So I'm going to actually start with that. Should be relatively simple, and maybe less of kind of recoloring them and more, just kind of creating a little filter effect that just pushes them slightly more purple. So I'm going to go down in here into find where those are. Yeah, there are going to be multiple layers here. Lots of layers in this illustration. Kind of fun to actually, as you turn different ones on and off, you can kind of see how that affects it. And like, hey, that actually looks really cool. Like, that could be another variation that actually works quite well. So I don't want to take away our kind of light and shadow. So I think we'll do it down here, kind of in the overall shadow layer. I may end up moving this, but I'm going to call this particle adjustment. And then to start with, just going to do kind of an overlay of color over the entirety of these bubbles. Gonna use just kind of a regular brush in here. Let's see, instead of the pattern brush, gonna go for just kind of a normal standard. I don't know if I want the rough, but try it. All right, so we're kind of filling in, and we're just going to use this as a basis to be able to create an adjustment here. So this kind of gives us the original color. And because we're doing it under some of the texture, even this kind of looks cool. It's like it creates its own, kind of different world of what this could look like, as how it kind of interacts with the other textures that are there in light and shadow. So I'm going to, get those in. Okay. And then we're going to play with the blending modes. So basically we want them to be a little bit darker. And so even that it's just a nudge, but it starts to kind of push it, in a slightly different direction. That makes them very bright, which is kind of cool, but I don't want them to take attention away from the quirky. And so one thing we're always balancing is, when you're, looking at contrast, the things that have the most contrast, the most, kind of, how bright something is against how dark something is one way to create focus in an image. And so the more contrast, the more your eye will be drawn to that area. Additionally, the more saturation there is in color, your eye will generally be drawn to that area. So when we add that very saturated purple, it starts to pull focus up to that area. So we don't want it to be quite so bright in that sense. I want to stay in our kind of still relatively pastel color palette here. So again, just kind of going down the menu to see what might be the best. And then the second thing that we can do is adjust. There's the ones that went bad. We can adjust the hue and saturation as well. But I want to get kind of a starting point here. So, I think actually going back to multiply, like that's going to probably be our best road here. So it's basically just making it a little bit darker, which is primarily what I want to do. I just hit the save button. Lots of layers means it takes longer to save. So we'll go down to tonal correction. I think just hue, saturation, luminosity, because it may just end up pushing this in an even slightly different direction. Luminosity will make it darker. Don't want to get crazy, but that's a big part of what we want to do here, is just kind of pushing them darker without making them too much brighter. So I think starting to kind of get into that territory. Some of them are still going to, still going to be a connection between these two things. They're not going to be as distinct as they are in the original, because we are kind of, bringing in this extra dynamic of the light and shadow that affects the whole scene and the whole character. But I do just want to create a little additional distinction between them. And so you can see, as I tweak these, kind of going maybe a little more in that direction. There's more connection to the hat as far as the color than there is to the donut, so to the rings, which is more how it is in the original as well. So then you can bring the luminosity down, which means we're making it darker. Bringing the saturation down means we're making it darker. And then I think can just kind of play with this a little bit. This is probably going too far overboard because, again, we're creating so much contrast here. But now the last lever I have is to play with the opacity, which can let me bring some of the original back into it. So I'm feeling like, somewhere in here, probably about 70%. It's subtle, but the difference between that and that, like all of a sudden there's a distinct nature to those bubbles. Now what I'm going to do is see where do I want it to fall in the layer stack. And I think going under a lot of our shadow elements will help it feel even more a part of the actual thing. And so there I feel like we can actually even bring the opacity down a little bit more. So again, we want that distinction without we want it to be distinct from the rings, but we don't want it to be pulling our attention because it's so dark away from the rest of the piece. So yeah, I think we can actually drop this quite a bit and kind of down into 35% now, and still making quite a difference there. So all right, so that was number one, to kind of create that adjustment. So I just want to, do you want to play, does it actually want to go up the stack a little bit? Maybe it does. Maybe it's still getting a little too intense. So in that case, we'll bring a little of the opacity back. And I think we want it to kind of feel more in the range of the hat rather than darker than that. Again, I don't want it to pull our attention away from the character. So still quite a big distinction there. Maybe we'll go 50%. I think we're kind of more in there. All right, feeling pretty good about that. It still feels very much in the range of the donuts, but it's not now kind of the identical color. And of course, the hat is still very much in range as well. All these colors are, pretty harmonious together. All right, so we'll do that. The background I'm feeling pretty good about. So again, I still want to play with it. The other thing that I did want to do is get that icon or that insignia in there. So forgive me, I think it's NFT JD who owns this Quirky. He posted, I'm saying he, if he or she posted the OG logo for me, and I thought this would be a cool thing to utilize. So I'm going to import that just as an image so I have it for reference. And then we'll pop this here, kind of just in between, and get just a sense of how it might work here. So I don't need it to be at full strength because I want to be able to see kind of how it lays there. I mean, it's actually it's actually pretty cool as it get a little bigger. Whoops, stole the eyes. Yeah, I think making it a little bit and kind of aligning it that. I mean, this was kind of meant to be. It just fits in there perfectly. So in that case, what I'm going to do is basically just trace this in here because I think it works incredibly well. So we'll make a new layer. And in this case, I'll worry about the color and everything after the fact. I think we do want it to kind of have this little bit of a stitch. So we'll use something pretty light to start with, but actually I'll go kind of with what the light color is, and then we can always adjust after the fact. So yeah, I'm basically just this in here. And then when we back out, let's see, is it visible enough once we take, oh, that's my signature. Did I just do the wrong layer? May have. Okay, I did make that its own layer. Good. Now, if we take that out, how visible is it? All right, so not enough. So that is why we will want to adjust. It is kind of right in the light there. So I think instead of having it be a white, logo on a light colored sweatshirt, we'll probably take a little liberty here to make it more of a dark logo on here. So just initially to see what that feels like. Yeah, even kind of like a dark blue feels like it lines up. Now maybe I need to do, I think the spacing of that isn't quite right. So it's a case where I'm going to actually redo this because I want to make sure it's a little more visible, but I think that's heading in the right direction. So let's just delete this guy. Bring this back in for reference. This time around, we know we're going to go more in that kind of darker blue direction. So I'll just start with that and then can adjust from there. All right, so I think I want to keep some of that texture, but we're going to make the scale really small, and that's as small as it goes. And then make the brush size a little bit smaller as well. All right, is that thinking about this more? You know what? I think this is going to be small enough and we do want it to be readable. So I think I'm going to actually go back to a regular brush for this one. And then I think we'll still pick up enough of the pattern because of the effect of it that I think that'll still work just great. It's kind of what we did with hat actually with the logo. All right, so let's go with this instead. I think that still feels a little too big. I'm gonna give myself just a little bit of stabilization. Yeah, okay. And this will let me capture a little more of the nature of the actual logo as well. Yeah, I think that was the right call. Okay, yeah, I think definitely the right call. Now, when we hide that, yeah, and again, we'll adjust the color, but much more readable as a insignia. And I might make it just a tad bigger now that we see it on there. Let's see how we feel about that. Don't want it to be competing, but just a little bit. Now, I think the question is, who wants this sweatshirt now? We're kind of designing a new piece here. So, I don't know. Let's talk to the team. And again, just going to play with some effects here. What I might do in this case is do that and then duplicate this. And we can do kind of a slight offset so that it gets a little bit of the kind of the stitching underneath it. That's not enough. More now. So let's make this. Let's see. It's going to need to go darker for sure. And I guess maybe what we'll do is, no, I need it to be more than that. Let's see. Maybe more like this. And then when we bring this one in, and we'll just offset this slightly so it just gets a little bit of an effect. Maybe go the other way. So it's like this tiny bit of just a little more than just a piece of line art over the top of it. And then as we adjust, definitely want it to be visible, but again, we don't want it to be pulling too much attention from the rest of the character. Like that's another thing that when we're talking about light and shadow or contrast, that quirky, the Q like really works really well because it really feels like it is sitting on the hat. It's not, a graphic line, and the context of this doesn't feel like it's sitting on top of the thing. It feels like it's part of the thing. That's what we're after here as well. So I think, again, want it to be visible, but not overwhelming. So actually kind of liking it a little more subtle in there. So maybe we drop this down a little bit more. And then I'll keep that in there just so we have it in the file. And then what I'm going to do is make this its own folder. This is the OG logo. Put that in that folder. And then that will let me now play with that as a single item as opposed to multiple layers. And then the last thing we'll do after, don't want to lock it. After a little more adjustment is we'll see where in the layer stack do we ultimately want it to land. Yep, obviously this is getting way too much, but there we're starting to see like some of the texture come through. Again, keeping it subtle. All right, so then if we bring this through down here, like that's going to get to be too much, but how far down does it need to go? Yeah, all right, that's going to be too much to get all the way down there. So let's drop it down to about 75. If we look at it close up, you know, I hate to say this, but the Q logo works so well because we really got some of the texture in there. This one is trickier because it's against such a light area where so much light is hitting the shoulder. But what I can do is just give it a little additional texture of its own, just a touch. I don't want to go crazy because I still want it to be extremely readable, but I want it to feel like it lives in this world. So I'm just giving it a little touch, especially on the light side, of it not just being this hard edged line against this very textured character. So little things make a difference. There we go. I think that much better as far as feeling like fully integrated in there. All right, so there's our logo. There's our slight distinction in color for the particles. I think we're down to the final step here, which is getting the, just seeing if there's anything that we want to do with the background. Again, I ended up being quite happy with it. So may or may not just revert back to exactly the way that it is right now, but I just want to play with it. Sometimes, going a little more crazy with the textures and the overlays, creates a really interesting, cool result. So just going to play with that for just a moment. And to start with, I want to bring in our original background color once again, and going to look at some of the other kind of things in the toolbox as far as textures and patterns. There's some really cool lithography elements in here. So playing with some of that might get interesting. Something like this even, if we make the texture density quite a bit more and the scale ratio up a bit, just being able to play with different ways that this can be presented is pretty cool. So that starts to get maybe too big. Let's see. I think that one's going off the rails a little bit at the moment. So yeah, I don't want to go too overboard. Let's bring the density back down a little bit because we do want the pattern. We don't just want it to be like a blob. All right. And then if I make the brush size bigger, and just to start with, get some multiply in here, just going to kind of throw down some of this across pieces of the image. And again, we're just kind of going for effect rather than any sort of carving out. You're not really creating a particular shadow or lighting effect, just more kind of looking at how these things interact with each other to create something interesting. So if we go now into a more tighter dot pattern, and then we'll play with some color modes here. So I'm kind of wondering, can we push him slightly back into the the world of color that he started in, but still keeping a lot of the effect that we have here. And so that's kind of what I'm playing with at the moment, as we just see if we like how it was or if we want to kind of keep pushing forward. And again, part of what I love is, once we like the result, we get this kind of amazing, almost abstract expressionist, kind of background effect from the combination of these things. So I'm just playing with blending modes again to see, something like that is pretty cool. Like when you get in close again, it's like then we can also see what happens as we move it down the layer stack, and it creates different effects. So something in there is pretty cool. So let's do that. And then I'm gonna go back, and now let's try. This is coming apart a little bit. There we go. It's like, what's rattling? All right, and then we'll go kind of the other way, go more to the blue side of things for a moment. And this is where I sometimes go a little like just truly kind of experimental, like what happens when we start to bring some of these other interesting, weird, kind of patterns in. Again, different things from old school printing. Let's try some zigzag and like a really different bit of color to see what that does. Just kind of creating interesting shapes. Still kind of a little curvy crackly in here, but I like that stuff. And then playing with that. So just there's layer after layer after layer of interesting overlaps and textures and patterns that I get a kick out of as we get to being able to kind of just explore what we can make with this. Even that, starts to be kind of neat. So let's see if we bring this down in here. And again, I just think going in here and seeing like this little snippet is just interesting. Just creates a lot of visual interest for the piece. Makes me want to get a little bit more actually now into what feels like a little bit of the light part of this. And then let's play that off against actually going even bigger with the pattern. And now if we push this more to the shadow side, so let's go more towards pink a little bit and do something like this. And let's see what happens when we integrate that. You can get, again, I talk about this as like, what I love about this style is using these very kind of old school patterns, like original patterns and printing techniques, but it'd be almost impossible to create that kind of an effect on a traditional printing press. Like it's not necessarily completely impossible depending on how inks are mixed and applied, but very challenging. And so being able to bring that aesthetic into something that is, basically only possible with modern, computing and digital techniques is what makes me excited about it. I think it ends up being a really cool, at least the story I tell myself is it ends up being a very cool amalgam of old and new through the lens of cool character. Actually kind of quite like that. And again, just subtle, but starts to create this additional layer of kind of cool effect in there. All right, we're getting close. We're definitely getting close. I think I might do one more thing here with this, although I'll switch it up now to a different pattern. Let's replace zigzag with wavy lines. And then go more kind of mid-tone, not all the way to pastel, but a little more mid-tone here. And make this brush bigger again. And not quite so large. Maybe we'll go kind of, again, mid-tone, mid-ground here as well. It's too much. Yeah, maybe, let's see. guess we'll go wavy lines here instead. Scale the ratio, bring, that's too much. Yeah, something more in here. Okay. And so now kind of mid-tone. Let's see if we just get a little of that in here as well. Not quite as aggressive. Okay. And then pushing that back in the stack as well just adds a little additional depth into that area, which I kind of like. So want to push it back a little bit so we're getting some of the overall color palette back in place. Yeah, really, really very close. I could kind of probably keep doing this for hours, but I like where we are ending up here. So glad we spent a little extra time playing with this. Let's bring little triangle action into it. So, and then go for more of our actual light source here. So pretty bright, pretty yellow. And I'm going to want that scale ratio to be smaller. And okay, brush size bigger. These are very small, aren't they? Too small for our purposes here. That's too big. All right, somewhere in there. So now thinking about this truly as kind of the light source. Just mostly constrained to that side in that area. And it's going to be subtle, but it's cool just to have that little extra bit of texture and depth in there. Yeah, I mean, when we're getting very, very light, you're barely going to see it, but you get little hints of it in areas where it gets on a bit of darker background. Okay, so we'll keep that little bit there. And then I think I like that. So let's do maybe these other triangles, but going on the other side back even a little bit darker, just to fill in the last little bit. And I think this might be it. Feeling like, again, I could just keep going, but feeling like this might be it. Okay. Whoops, hitting that lock by accident. Okay. I don't want them to completely disappear. So, again, subtle is good. Pointless is less so. Okay, there we go. Just that little bit. And so once again, going into these details, I love how this turns out. All right, well, I am going to call it there. I think we've got a really cool final character here. Yeah, this will be dropped into your wallet later today. Or I'll give myself the wiggle room to say by morning, since gas fees have been insane. But I will mint this on Ethereum and drop it into your wallet by morning. And there we go. That's a Quirk. So thank you for joining me. Last couple things I'll say just on the Macroverse side of things. Of course, we're very excited about working with Quirkies on this. If you're not currently subscribed to our Drip House channel on Solana, we're doing a bunch of really fun stuff over there right now as well, and maybe an opportunity to do something on the Quirky side there also. We've got some very fun stuff coming up over the next couple of weeks. A really cool announcement coming tomorrow. Our drops tend to be on Sunday right now there. So if you're not in Drip House in general, I definitely recommend it. It's super fun. But the Macroverse channel, especially, we just crossed over almost 125,000 subscribers, and lots of fun to be had there. So that's my plug for you. If you come into the Macroverse Discord, we also set it up where you can token gate yourself as a Quirky by verifying your assets. You can get a Quirky role, and we'll know that you're in the community with us on the Quirky side of things. I would like to say that's a wrap, but I feel like we kind of have to say that's a Quirk. So everybody have a phenomenal day and rest of your week, and more to come.